Margot felt the old man's pulse stutter against her fingers before she made her choice. Stay kneeling and die with him, or run and let them win. The whispered oaths she pressed to his ear was for her alone, no one else in that room of Chicago's deadliest men meant to hear it. The silence in the private dining room of the Golden Room was absolute, heavy with the stench of expensive cigars and impending violence. Margot knelt on the jagged shards of crystal, her breathing shallow and ragged against the agonizing constriction of the white satin dress. The fabric was 2 sizes too small, the zipper digging brutally into the flesh of her back, the seams groaning across her wide hips and thick thighs. That was the point. Tommy Russo had handed her the dress an hour ago in the alley behind the restaurant, along with $5,000 in crisp $100 bills. The instructions were simple and incredibly cruel. She was to wear the mock wedding gown, walk out during the most tense syndicate summit of the decade, and serve a roasted pig with a diamond ring in its mouth to Cassian Adler. Tommy wanted to humiliate the North Side boss by offering him a fat, ridiculous bride in front of the entire Chicago underworld. Margot had needed the money to keep her little brother in a specialized care facility, and she had swallowed her pride. But then she had walked through the velvet curtains. She had felt the terrifying heat of 50 ruthless men staring at her body with open disgust and mockery, and she had seen Tobias. The elderly man was chained to a heavy oak chair near Tommy Russo's side of the long mahogany table. Tobias had once been a respected advisor, but now he was just a battered, mute trophy for Tommy to parade around. As Margot had taken her first trembling steps, one of Tommy's hulking enforcers had casually kicked the leg of Tobias's chair. The old man had pitched forward, hitting the marble floor hard, clutching his chest as he struggled to draw breath. The enforcer had laughed and raised his heavy steel-toed boot to stomp on the old man's fragile ribs. Margot had not thought about the $5,000. She had not thought about the guns bulging beneath tailored jackets. She simply let go of the heavy silver tray. The crash paralyzed the room. Before the enforcer could bring his boot down, Margot had thrown herself forward. She covered Tobias entirely with her substantial frame, shielding his frail body beneath her soft, thick curves. The steel-toed boot connected with Margot's shoulder instead. The sickening crack of impact echoed through the cavernous room, sending a blinding flash of agony down her left arm. She gasped, but she did not move. She pressed her face into Tobias's trembling shoulder, absorbing the shock, taking up space exactly where she was not supposed to be. A cruel, booming laugh shattered the tension. Tommy Russo stood up at the head of the table, his face flushed with cheap wine and malice. He pointed a thick finger at the tangled pile of white satin and bleeding humanity on the floor. "Well, Cassian," Tommy sneered, his voice echoing off the gold-leafed ceiling, "I told you I brought you a gift. I know you've been lonely since you took over the North Side. I figured you needed a bride who could handle your massive ego. I just didn't expect the fat pig to dive straight into the mud before she even reached the altar." The sycophants on Tommy's side of the table erupted into ugly, jagged laughter. Margot squeezed her eyes shut, hot tears of profound humiliation stinging her cheeks. The white satin dress was stained with champagne and Tobias's blood. Her shoulder screamed in pain. She waited for the next blow, tightening her grip on the old man, refusing to abandon him. The laughter died abruptly. It did not fade. It was cut off as if a vacuum had suddenly sucked all the air out of the room. Margot opened her eyes just enough to see a pair of flawlessly polished, custom-made black Oxfords step into her line of sight. Cassian Adler stood over her. He was 34 years old, and he carried an aura of such absolute, terrifying authority that even Tommy Russo's men instinctively reached for their weapons, though Cassian had not drawn his. He wore a midnight blue bespoke suit that clung to his lean, heavily muscled frame. His face was carved from cold marble, his sharp jawline tight, his dark eyes unreadable as he looked down at Margot. "Get up," Cassian said. His voice was not a shout. It was a low, resonant command that vibrated in Margot's chest. She swallowed hard, her throat dry. She carefully shifted her weight, making sure Tobias was safe before she pushed herself up on her good arm. Her shoulder throbbed with a sickening rhythm. She stood before the most dangerous man in the city, the white satin dress pulling uncomfortably tight across her stomach and chest, the cheap fabric completely ruined. She expected him to finish the joke. She expected him to sneer. Instead, Cassian looked at her. He really looked at her. His gaze dropped from her terrified brown eyes to the angry purple bruise already forming on her exposed shoulder, and then down to the way she subtly positioned her thick legs to block anyone from stepping toward the old man behind her. Tommy leaned over the table, a smug grin plastered across his face. "Go on, Cassian. Give the bride a kiss. She cost me $5,000. Cassian did not look at Tommy. He slowly reached into the pocket of his suit jacket, every gun in the room leveled at his chest. Cassian ignored them. He pulled out a heavy, solid platinum signet ring, bearing the crest of the Adler family. He reached out and gently took Margot's right hand. His skin was warm, his long fingers calloused but incredibly careful as they wrapped around her trembling, bruised knuckles. "You brought me a bride, Tommy," Cassian said softly, his dark eyes fixed entirely on Margot's face. "And you were right. I require someone who does not flinch. I accept." Cassian slid the heavy platinum ring onto Margot's index finger. It was cold and impossibly heavy, settling against her skin like a physical anchor. A collective gasp went around the room. Tommy Russo's smile vanished, replaced by a deep, ugly red flush of fury. "What the hell are you doing, Adler?" Tommy barked, his hand dropping toward his waistband. It was a joke. "You're marrying a piece of trash waitressing meat to save face." "She is not meat," Cassian said, his voice dropping into a deadly, gravelly register. He smoothly stepped in front of Margot, his broad shoulders completely obscuring her from Tommy's sight. He turned his head just enough to address the furious boss. "She has more courage in her little finger than you have in your entire decaying operation. You wanted to humiliate me. Instead, you just gave me a wife. And if any man in this room disrespects my wife by breathing in her direction, I will personally burn this restaurant to the ground with everyone locked inside." Cassian looked down at Tobias, who was coughing weakly on the floor. Cassian snapped his fingers. Two of his own men, moving with terrifying military precision, stepped forward and gently lifted the old man by his arms, supporting his weight. "We are leaving," Cassian announced. He did not wait for Tommy's permission. He did not wait for the inevitable explosion of violence. He kept his hand firmly wrapped around Margot's, his thumb lightly stroking the back of her palm in a silent, anchoring rhythm. He pulled her forward. Margot stumbled, her cheap heels catching on the marble, but Cassian caught her instantly, slipping his arm around her thick waist. He did not grab her with disgust. He held her firmly, respectfully, guiding her through the sea of armed men who parted like a Red Sea before his cold fury. They walked out of the private dining room, through the lavish main floor of the Golden Room, and out into the biting Chicago night. The cold air hit Margot's exposed skin like a shockwave. An armored black Maybach S680 idled at the curb, surrounded by 4 massive SUVs. Cassian's men ushered Tobias into one of the trailing vehicles before opening the heavy rear door of the Maybach. "Get in," Cassian commanded softly. Margot hesitated, looking down at the ruined satin dress, at her bruised arm, and finally at the impossibly expensive leather interior of the car. "I'm going to ruin the seats," she whispered, the sheer absurdity of the situation finally crashing down on her. "I don't belong in there." Cassian stopped. He turned to fully face her on the sidewalk, oblivious to the heavily armed guards forming a perimeter around them. He looked at her wide hips, her full chest heaving with panicked breaths, and the dirt smeared across her pale face. "You put your body between a steel boot and a helpless old man," Cassian said, his voice devoid of any mockery. "You took up space in a room designed to make people feel small. You belong wherever you choose to sit, Margot. Get in the car." The interior of the Maybach smelled of expensive leather, faint cedar, and the metallic tang of adrenaline. Margot sat rigidly against the door, trying to make herself as small as possible, though her natural curves fought against the effort. The platinum ring on her finger felt heavier than a stone, an absurd glittering anchor in the dim cabin light. Cassian sat on the opposite side, watching the neon reflections of the city slide across the tinted windows. He had poured her a glass of water from a small refrigerated compartment, and she held it with both hands to stop her violent trembling. "Why did you do that?" Margot finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The tires hummed over the wet asphalt of Michigan Avenue. "You could have just walked out. You didn't have to put this on me." Cassian slowly turned his head. His dark eyes caught the passing streetlights, revealing a deep, ancient exhaustion beneath his lethal exterior. "Tommy thought he was weaponizing your body against me," he said quietly. "He thought presenting a woman of your substance, squeezed into a dress designed to mock her, would reduce me. He is a small man who only understands small cruelties." "But I am a waitress," Margot said, her voice cracking. "I'm nothing to you. Tomorrow morning, you're going to have the entire city laughing at you." "Let them laugh," Cassian replied, a dark, dangerous edge entering his tone. "By tomorrow night, half of Tommy's illegal gambling parlors will be burning. You saved Tobias. Do you know who that old man is?" Margot shook her head. "He was my father's most trusted advisor," Cassian explained, loosening his silk tie. 10 years ago, Tommy's faction ambushed our compound. Tobias took 3 bullets meant for my younger sister. He survived, but he lost his voice. My sister did not survive. Tommy has kept Tobias for the last 2 years as a pet, dragging him to meetings to remind me of my failure. I have spent 24 months trying to find a way to get him out without sparking an all-out war on the streets. You accomplished it in 30 seconds by dropping a tray. Margot stared at him, the realization settling heavily in her chest. The ruthless, terrifying Cassian Adler was carrying a wound so deep it defined his entire existence. "You couldn't save her," she whispered softly. Cassian's jaw clenched. The muscles in his neck jumped. But he did not look away. "No, I was too slow. I was too weak. When I saw that boot coming down on Tobias tonight, I saw it all happening again. But then you threw yourself over him. You did not flinch." The Maybach smoothly descended into a highly secured underground parking garage. The heavy concrete pillars and harsh fluorescent lights felt miles away from the gilded cage of the restaurant. When the car stopped, Cassian stepped out and walked around to open her door himself. He did not wait for a guard to do it. He offered his hand. Margot took it, letting him pull her up. They took a private elevator directly into the penthouse at 1440 Lake Shore Drive. The doors opened to a sprawling, immaculate space of floor-to-ceiling glass, dark oak floors, and minimalist steel furniture. It was the home of a man who never fully rested. A silver-haired man in a tweed jacket was waiting by the massive leather sofa. He carried a battered leather medical bag. "Dr. Aris," Cassian said, nodding toward the man. "Check her shoulder. And then go check on Tobias in the safe house downstairs." The doctor approached Margot with gentle professionalism. He instructed her to sit on the edge of the sofa. When he touched the zipper of the ruined satin dress to examine her back, Margot flinched, her cheeks burning hot. The dress was so impossibly tight that it had left deep red grooves in her skin, a physical manifestation of her humiliation. Cassian, seeing her distress, immediately turned his back, giving her absolute privacy. "I will be in the kitchen," he said, his voice tight. "Take your time." The doctor carefully cut the seam of the dress near the shoulder, peeling the fabric back to reveal a massive, ugly contusion blooming across Margot's collarbone. "You are very lucky, young lady, doctor," Aris murmured, applying a cooling salve that instantly numbed the fire in her skin. No broken bones, but a deep bone bruise. "You will be sore for weeks." He bandaged her shoulder tightly, left a bottle of painkillers on the glass coffee table, and quietly exited the penthouse. Margot sat alone on the massive sofa, clutching the torn fabric of the dress against her chest. She felt exposed, exhausted, and incredibly hungry. The adrenaline crash was leaving her hollow. She heard footsteps on the oak floor and looked up. Cassian walked back into the living room. He had taken off his suit jacket and rolled up the sleeves of his crisp white shirt, revealing forearms corded with muscle and laced with faded, brutal scars. In his hands, he carried a large tray. He set it down on the coffee table in front of her. It was not a silver serving tray meant for humiliation. It was simple wood, loaded with steaming food, thick slices of roasted beef, a massive bowl of buttered potatoes, fresh bread, and a tall glass of milk. "You did not eat at the restaurant," Cassian said simply, taking a seat in the armchair opposite her. "You need fuel to heal. Eat." Margot looked at the food, her stomach clenching with violent desire. But a lifetime of conditioning, of cruel comments from managers and strangers about her size, made her hesitate. She nervously adjusted the torn satin across her wide waist. "I shouldn't," she muttered. "I'm all ready." "Do not finish that sentence," Cassian interrupted. His voice was sharp but not angry. It was fiercely protective. Do not insult the body that just absorbed a blow meant for an old man. You are strong, Margot. Your body is a weapon of compassion. You require sustenance. I will not sit in my own home and watch you starve yourself out of some misplaced shame taught to you by small-minded fools. A tear broke free, tracking hot and fast down Margot's cheek. She reached out with her good hand and took a piece of the warm bread. She brought it to her lips. It was the best thing she had ever tasted. She ate slowly at first, then with desperate hunger. Cassian did not stare at her, but he did not look away either. The second explosive charge blew the heavy steel door entirely off its hinges, sending it crashing onto the dark oak floor. Acrid gray smoke poured into the pristine living room, followed instantly by the staccato roar of automatic weapons. Cassian shoved Margot hard behind the massive slab of the kitchen island, bullets shattering the floor to ceiling windows above them. Glass rained down like deadly hail, sparkling in the dim emergency lights that flickered to life. Cassian returned fire with cold, terrifying precision. His face was a mask of pure violence. His muscles coiled tight as he dropped the first two men stepping through the ruined doorway. But there were more behind them. Heavy combat boots crunched over the shattered glass. "They are wearing tactical armor," Cassian shouted over the deafening gunfire, ejecting a spent magazine and slamming a fresh one home. Tommy sent his elite extraction team. He does not want to kill you. He wants to cage you. Margot pressed her back against the cold marble of the island, her bruised shoulder screaming with every ragged breath. The ruined satin dress clung to her sweating skin. She looked at Cassian, at the blood streaking his cheek from a grazing glass shard, and the lie she had lived for 10 years finally broke. "I am Margot Hale," she yelled, her voice cutting through a brief lull in the gunfire. "I am Arthur Hale's daughter." Cassian did not look surprised. He fired 3 suppressed shots, pinning down a heavily armed man trying to flank them through the dining room. "He killed my father right in front of me," Margot continued, the words tearing out of her throat. "I was 8 years old. I hid in the heating vent. Tommy tortured him for the offshore encryption keys, but my father never wrote them down. He made me memorize them. I have $3 billion locked inside my head, Cassian. That is why Tommy wants me." A massive caliber round chewed through the edge of the marble island, sending a spray of stone chips into the air. "If Tommy gets you, he controls the entire Midwest," Cassian said, his voice terrifyingly calm amidst the chaos. "He will use the money to wipe out the North Side, and then he will kill you the moment he extracts the numbers. We need to reach the panic room at the end of the hall." "We cannot move," Margot panted, looking at the sheer volume of incoming fire. "The hallway is completely exposed." Cassian looked at her, his dark eyes burning with absolute certainty. "You trusted me enough to stand between Tobias and a steel boot. Trust me now. When I say run, you move that beautiful, powerful body as fast as you can." Before she could process his words, Cassian reached into his tactical vest and pulled out a flashbang grenade. He pulled the pin and hurled it over the island. The blinding white flash and concussive roar paralyzed the attackers for 3 crucial seconds. "Run," Cassian roared. Margot lunged. She did not stumble. She used her heavy, powerful legs to propel herself forward. sprinting down the hallway with Cassian right behind her. Bullets snapped past her ears, burying themselves in the drywall. They crashed into the reinforced panic room, Cassian hitting the heavy steel locking mechanism just as a volley of bullets sparked against the closing door. The room plunged into absolute darkness, save for the blue glow of a single computer terminal on the desk. They were trapped. A heavy, rhythmic pounding began against the steel door. It was the sound of a cutting torch being ignited. Cassian checked his weapon. "I have 4 rounds left," he said quietly. "The safe house downstairs is under attack, too. My men are pinned down. It will take them 20 minutes to reach us. That door will fail in 5. The computer terminal suddenly chimed. The screen flickered, and a raw audio feed connected from the hallway outside. Tommy Russo's voice echoed through the small room, thick with sadistic triumph. "I know you are in there, Hale." Tommy snarled over the speaker. "You grew up into a heavy girl, didn't you? Must be hard carrying all that weight around. Now listen to me. I have a team standing outside the Sunnyside Care Facility right now. I know about your little brother. You open that door and recite the keys, or I burn his hospital bed with him in it." The blood froze in Margot's veins. Her brother was the only piece of her heart left intact. For a decade, she had made herself small, invisible, taking insults and meager pay just to keep him safe. Now, her worst nightmare was banging on the steel door. Cassian stood perfectly still in the blue light. He did not offer empty comfort. He looked at her, acknowledging the impossible weight she carried. He slowly extended his hand, holding out his gun. He was offering her the choice. Margot looked at the weapon, then at the computer terminal on the desk. The terminal was directly hardwired into the North Side Syndicate's secure financial network. She did not take the gun. She stepped past Cassian, her ruined satin dress dragging on the floor, her bruised shoulder throbbing. She sat heavily in the steel chair, her wide hips filling the seat, taking command of the space. She placed her trembling hands on the keyboard. 10 years of hiding ended now. She closed her eyes for a single second, accessing the vast, complex labyrinth of numbers she had kept buried since she was 8 years old. "What are you doing?" Tommy's voice mocked through the speaker. The cutting torch hissed louder. The steel door was glowing cherry red in the center. "I am not a waitress," Margot said softly. She began to type. Her thick, capable fingers flew across the keys with terrifying speed, entering strings of alphanumeric codes that no other living soul possessed. She bypassed the standard syndicate firewalls in seconds, accessing the dormant ghost accounts her father had built. Cassian watched her, absolute awe radiating from his hardened features. "I am Arthur Hale's daughter," Margot typed faster, the terminal screen flashing with cascading data. "And I balance the books." She executed the final command sequence. In less than 40 seconds, Margot drained the $3 billion from the ghost accounts. She did not just take the money. She weaponized it. She authorized a catastrophic, irreversible wire transfer, dumping the entire sum directly into the operational accounts of the federal government, flagged as a massive illegal gambling seizure linked explicitly to Tommy Russo's South Side front companies. The terminal flashed green. "Transfer complete." Margot leaned into the microphone. "Check your phone, Tommy." Outside the door, the hissing of the cutting torch stopped. A tense, suffocating silence fell over the audio feed. Then, the sound of a phone vibrating. "You stupid fat bitch!" Tommy's voice suddenly shrieked through the speaker, completely devoid of his previous arrogance. "What did you do?" "The feds are raiding my casinos. They are raiding the ports. They have everything." "I gave them the money," Margot said, her voice turning into cold, unyielding steel. "You have no billions. You have no empire. You are bankrupt, Tommy. And if you even look at my brother's hospital, the feds will trace the remaining crumbs directly to your personal accounts. You are nothing now." Sirens began to wail in the distance. A massive, overwhelming chorus of police vehicles swarming the Lakeshore Drive area, drawn by the federal alarm Margot had just triggered. The men outside the door panicked. Footsteps retreated rapidly down the hall, abandoning the breached door as Tommy's extraction team fled the sinking ship of his empire. The audio feed clicked off. The panic room was silent. Margot slumped back in the chair, the adrenaline completely leaving her body. She was shaking violently. Cassian walked over to her. He did not speak. He knelt on the floor beside her chair, bringing himself lower than her. He took her trembling hands in his, pressing his lips to her bruised knuckles. He looked up at her, honoring the incredible, terrifying power she had just unleashed. 3 days later, the morning sun poured across the sprawling lawns of the Adler estate in the countryside. The South Side Syndicate was in ashes. Tommy Russo had been indicted on 70 counts of federal racketeering, his assets seized, his men scattered or absorbed. He would spend the rest of his miserable life rotting in a supermax facility. Margot stood on the stone terrace, wearing a soft, flowing emerald robe that Cassian had bought for her. It fit perfectly, draped luxuriously over her wide hips and full chest. She watched her brother, safe and smiling, walking slowly through the gardens with Dr. Aris and Tobias, who was communicating through a digital tablet. Cassian stepped onto the terrace. He handed her a steaming cup of coffee. He wore a simple black sweater, the lethal tension completely gone from his shoulders. "The estate gates are open," Cassian said softly, standing beside her. "Your brother will have the best medical care in the world here, permanently funded. Your father's legacy is settled. You have no enemies left. If you want to leave, Margot, a car is waiting. You are completely free." Margot took a sip of the coffee. She looked at the heavy platinum ring still resting on her finger. She had not taken it off. She turned her head, meeting Cassian's dark, intensely vulnerable eyes. "I told you in the car," Margot said, her lips curving into a soft, genuine smile. "I belong wherever I choose to sit, and I am choosing to sit right here." Cassian let out a long, ragged breath, pulling her gently against his chest. He buried his face in her dark hair, finally finding the peace that had eluded him for 10 years. But far down the long driveway, just beyond the iron gates, a sleek silver car with diplomatic plates idled in the shadows, watching the estate in complete silence. Did Margot's brilliant, ruthless move to protect her brother and destroy Tommy's empire leave you cheering for the ultimate underdog? Who do you think is watching them from the silver car at the gates? Drop your theories in the comments below. If you loved seeing a powerful plus-size heroine claim her space and rewrite the rules of the Chicago underworld, hit that like button. Share this story with someone who needs a thrilling reminder to never shrink themselves for anyone. And subscribe to our channel so you never miss another jaw-dropping romance. Stay fearless.